Welcome to Flam Flam Sports. My name is Richard Harris, and let's talk sports. Welcome to Flam Flam Sports. My name is Richard Harris. I'm going to confess, I have been watching women's college basketball since the 90s. Wasn't a big fan of it in the 80s because didn't really follow the women's game because it wasn't really on TV unless you had cable TV. But basically, I started following women's college basketball in the 90s. And I got to see some of the great players of that era dominate the game. I think her name was Charlotte Smith. She was David Thompson's niece. When she came over the half court, pulled up for three, and hit the game-winning shot to win the national championship in North Carolina. I remember Cheryl Swoop scoring 47 for Texas Tech. Watched every second of that game. She was unreal. But what really got me watching college basketball was a college from a state known as the Nutmeg State called Connecticut. Rebecca Lobo, Jennifer Rosati. That team had some talent, and their arch rivals was Tennessee. Pat Summitt was the coach. And basically, Connecticut was trying to become relevant like Tennessee. And of course, you read the Sports Illustrated stories about Michelle Marciniak, who went to Tennessee, Kara Lawson, Tennessee. We won't talk about Shamika Holesclaw and Candace Parker, but those were later on. But you read so much about these ladies. And I remember just watching Connecticut and seeing how they got stuff done. Rebecca Lobo never, ever fulfilled a professional promise because of knee injuries. But that team was really good. And that was the first team that put Gino on the map. And then they ended up getting Karen Walters and Lakeisha Sales, like Swen Cash. Like, they have so many great players that have gone through UConn that it's amazing that the talent pool of women's basketball has not evolved as it should have. Because, yes, lately, the teams that were great in the 90s when I started watching, which was Tennessee, it was Duke, it was North Carolina, it was Texas Tech, it was Connecticut. They were not the same teams of the previous generation that was Louisiana Tech and the USC and Vanderbilt. Tennessee's always been a mainstay. But nowadays it's Baylor, it's Mississippi State, Michigan State, of course Connecticut, and South Carolina, Notre Dame. But it just seems like the talent pool has reached across the country. And yet, the same things still remain the same. And that is, Connecticut is really good. They play everybody. That, to me, is the most extraordinary thing about what they've been able to accomplish. And into this year as well. Even when they had the original streak back in the day when they won 90 games in a row, something like that. And I'm totally drawing a blank on her name. She's my favorite player in UConn. And she plays for the Minnesota Wild now. Lynx, in the WNBA. The point I'm trying to make is Connecticut plays everybody. They don't care where you are, where you're from, who you are, who you got. By the way, it's Maya Moore. How could I forget Maya Moore? How can you forget Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, and the recent woman who went the whole 4 years of playing in the championship every year, Brianna Stewart. They play everybody. This season already, in all of their games, they have played 3 different teams that were number 2 in the country and beat them. They have beaten Notre Dame already this year. They had their toughest game so far was the first game of the season against Florida State, who happens to be right now in the top 10. People say their conference is not good because some of the teams aren't as good as they have been in years past. That's fine. But they play everybody. East Coast, West Coast, South, North, Midwest, Southwest. They go, and it's funny, you forget the UConn game is on. And then you remember the UConn game is on, and they're up by 25 points. They're up by 15 points. When you turn it up by 40 points. And you ask yourself, how is this possible? I was watching the ticker because Kansas and West Virginia were playing a classic where West Virginia blew a 14-point lead with 2:45 to go. The ESPN ticker didn't put up the score. They just said, UConn going for 100 wins on ESPN2. And I turned over to the game and UConn was up by 18. How do they do it? They bring in these players who just know how to play in a system, who make three-point shots, who defer to the better players, and they get it done. There's no special formula. I've watched at least 8 games of theirs this year where they play and they make threes, and they're good threes. It's not like they're, one person is showing off or, someone's taking bad shots. No, it's like they run their offense and someone's always open. And the other team, okay, Connecticut might have some size and it intimidates people. But tonight's game against South Carolina has size. And maybe that's why UConn didn't win by 25 like normal. But it makes you speechless. Trying to figure out how they keep doing it. With great player after great player. And some of these players were preordained. Brianna, they said, was going to be a superstar. And she lived up to it. They said that Maya Moore was going to be a superstar. She's lived up to it. Nikisha Sales was killing everybody until she blew out her knee. They didn't know Carol Walters was going to, develop into that kind of player, but she developed into an unbelievable talent. Sue Bird, They said she would be the greatest leader, which she was, until Tarazi came along and put that on another level. But this team just doesn't know how to fail. They don't know how to struggle. They have a bullseye on them every game they play. And they just go for it. They don't care. And in fact, they don't even care if they lose. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to win the national championship. They put up Maya Moore's record at UConn. She was 150-4. That's incredible. And that's not even the best record. Because Breanna Stewart, I believe, only lost 2 or 3 games in her whole college career. And it's funny, men don't have a problem talking about UConn basketball. Men don't have a problem watching UConn basketball. Because it's basketball played at a high level. It's not gimmicky. It's not, man, if I was guarding her, she wouldn't know. They run an offense. They get the ball out of the net. They get up the court. They find the open player, and she makes shots. The big man runs. It's like they're running the old fast break to North Carolina runs. Well, they send the big man right down the middle of the floor. They got the good wings on the outside. And if you don't cover the big man down the floor, the big man scores. If you cover it, the wings are open, they hit threes. They don't care who's the leading scorer any night. They just play. Think about winning 100 games in a row with different players. Think about that for a second. Now, granted, 80 of those was with the best player in the country. And the loss they lost to Stanford in overtime. By 1 point, I think it was. And I watched that game. And all those Stanford players are playing in the WNBA. They say it's sometimes better to be lucky than good. I don't buy that. I like good. I like seeing basketball, football, baseball, hockey, golf, tennis, whatever the sport is, played at its highest level. That way you learn. Why is it at its highest level? When Golden State is lighting people up in the NBA, scoring 75, 80 points in the first half, it's because they are moving the ball, 30 plus assists, so on and so forth. That's what this UConn team does. They move the ball, get the ball to the right person, and it's just beautiful basketball to watch. And think about it. Had they beaten Stanford that night, the streak would be at 148. So they're 147-1. God bless Gino. Let's see how far that streak can go. But that's just one man's opinion.